Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we love to give the listeners a look behind the curtain. So I think it's important that they know we just spent the last, 30, 45 minutes messing around with a bunch of other different ways we could possibly stream this and new and exciting different stuff. And nothing worked. So it's great. So we're doing it the normal way. It's fantastic. I'm great. How are you? Much the same, I suspect.
Well, the thing is, like, we could have had the show done by now, but we're, tinkering and looking at stuff um, and trying to find something better for the people. Now, me, I think this is plenty good. You, Tom, the perfectionist, is like, no, we can give them more. And I'm like, do they deserve it? And you're like, yes, they deserve it. And so, we're always trying to improve the product. I should say always trying to improve the product. Sometimes we're trying to improve the product. And this was one of those days. Did it work?
Yeah. If I was trying to explain this podcast to someone and they're like, you have two sentences. And I think the first sentence would be perpetually striving for improvement. Second sentence, and failing. That's it. That's it. That's us. That's us. And we talk about football sometimes. That's it.
Sometimes. And today we are continuing our spring positional previews. And this one for me, Tom. First, we did mention at the end of the last show, we got some news before the show is over that spring football is starting for the Buckeyes on Friday, March 19th, with the spring game scheduled for April 17th. And so just reiterate, spring football is starting March 19th. Now, when I had originally set up these preview shows, it was to have them done in time to start spring football starting like that Monday of March 15th or whatever. However, now we've got a little extra time. We've got 2 extra shows to just, got some elbow room. So we still have the defensive backs, which we're doing right now. Then we go to offensive line on Tuesday, some bold spring predictions on Thursday. And then we've got a week of, maybe 3 total shows of bold spring predictions. Who even knows?
Seems like the listeners could help us out with some bold predictions of their own. Perhaps we should solicit those, and then we do our bold predictions, and then their bold predictions, and then we can see who's right, who is bolder, and who is more correct.
That's good. And also, like, if a listener submits a bold prediction that we like, we don't include that, and we use it as our own. Like, ooh, I like
Smart.
that one.
Now you're thinking.
This one's off the show. So that's where we are. That's what's going to be happening. And who knows, Tom, maybe if we ever get to go to a practice, then we would have an emergency, like post-practice live stream type of thing. We'll see. I would imagine it would have to be at the shoe for that to happen, but we'll see. They scrimmage every Saturday, so maybe one of those scrimmages could happen at the shoe, and they would let us in for 4 minutes of it, 5 minutes.
How long do they stretch? That long. That'll be fun. Whose hamstrings are looking good? Hey, speaking for hamstrings on the team this year is my first bold prediction.
Oh,
yeah. By the time spring football rolls around, I will have gotten my second COVID vaccine shot, so I will be officially invincible and should be able to just go my understanding is I can just go wherever I want at that point. Like, Ohio State football practice, Fort Knox, the White House. Like, yeah, absolutely. Once you get that second COVID vaccine, it's like the world is your oyster. So.
Yeah, it'll be like when
that's there.
Me, you, and Mark got off the plane in Florida and went immediately to the 7-on-7 practice, and you and Mark are just walking out onto the field and talking to everybody. You could just go do that on the practice field. See what happens. I'll make sure to have the cameras rolling as you are hog-tied to the ground and escorted out. And
the good news is Anthony Schlegel's in Jacksonville now, so I won't get choke slammed down to the field. So that's the good news.
Is it?
I mean, news. For me, it is. Maybe not for you. Maybe not for viral video purposes, but for me, it's definitely the good news.
Well, we'll try to get that worked out. Maybe we can create something after that. As they bring you back, we throw like cat bitches at you or something.
Just you walking behind me, just ringing a bell saying shame, shame, shame. That'll be great. That'll be great.
But then we probably couldn't monetize it because we'd been, I don't know, like YouTube would be like, no, this is gimmick infringement or something. But Tom, let's talk about the secondary. of which we're supposed to be previewing like this position and giving people information. And yes, speaking matter of factly.
Speaking of things that ended, yes, speaking of things that ended badly, Game of Thrones and the season for the Ohio State secondary last year.
Oh, now, shame on you, Tom. Shame on you. So, if I ask you to give me one sure thing you know about this Ohio State secondary, like one thing that you go into this spring knowing, whether it's personnel or yes, we know Seven Banks is one of your starting corners. Outside of that, what is one thing you go into the spring knowing that you're sure of? And don't say, I think there's some questions about the secondary. Not like that. But what are you confident about the secondary? What do you know about the secondary? What are you sure about this secondary as we go into the spring?
I like the fact that you took away both of my possible answers, which were that Seven Banks is going to start and that we don't really know anything other than the fact that Seven Banks is going to start, because that feels like about it. Yeah, like if Cameron Brown is healthy, Cameron Brown will start. I'm pretty confident in that, but there's an if that starts that, so it's not really confident. Yeah, there's what are they going to play? How are they going to line? How are they going to line up schematically? Which guys are going to fit into which positions? Are any of the freshmen going to be able to make any kind of an impact or get into the rotation? Like, maybe, and at this point, I have said that every time we do these positions, I say that this is a really interesting thing, a really interesting position, because it's like there's so many questions that we don't have here, and there's pieces. It's not like, yeah, they're definitely doomed, so there's no drama there. Like, this is not like UMass football spring preview where it's just like, yeah, this is going to go terribly. They have the pieces for this to go okay, I think, but how are they going to line up? Who's going to be the guy out there in each of those spots? I feel like Seven Banks is Seven Banks is going to start. Cam Brown is going to start if Cam Brown is healthy, but we probably won't know for sure exactly how healthy Cam Brown is until close to the start of the season. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, and I am very hopeful that we will get to see enough spring practice to have a better idea where things stand a month from now.
And the amazing thing is, once we see spring practice and spring practice is concluded, we still really won't know as much as we need to about the secondary, because we don't know that Cameron Brown, what he'll be doing, if anything. Court Williams likely won't be doing anything. J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock, your incoming corners, aren't here until the summer. So we may have plenty of information, but still missing a great deal of data when it comes to figuring out exactly what the secondary will look like. What we will know, however, is, well, what we think we may know is, what is the system? Is it one high? Are we talking about, the boundary safety is the one high, and it just depends on whoever, sometimes it's Josh Proctor, sometimes it's Lathan Ransom. Is it that? Is it a 4-2-5 defense now, where now you've basically got three safeties, and is Josh Proctor the guy that's more closer to the line of scrimmage and there's two safeties behind him? Or is it, is he just a placeholder for Court Williams and then eventually he moves back to safety? All we know about this secondary is it's just all questions. And yes, that is interesting. It is also kind of irritating. And also, as we ask questions of the coaches, while Kerry Combs will say a lot and he'll give us a lot of in-depth stuff, I don't know how much inside baseball they'll go in terms of what the defense is or what they're looking like, because it's always, well, we want to be able to do everything. We're multiple. We're not just one high, or we're not just off man. We play man press, and so yes, you play it all. But if you had a base defense, what would it be? Oh, we don't have base defenses. What is that? So at least maybe we will learn, like, okay, if you don't, if you don't want to tell us what your base defense is, tell us who your starting 11 is, which of course they would never do. But okay, are you starting two linebackers or three linebackers? Maybe let's start there. Could you at least tell us that, Tom? Would we at least be able to get that information?
I think the answer to that is going to be, well, we don't necessarily want to put guys in buckets because what is a linebacker really? Like I feel like the answer to that would get pretty existential pretty quickly. Like, aren't we all linebackers in our own way? I mean, yeah, I feel like we're going into the spring with questions. We're going to come out of the spring with more information, but not necessarily answers. Because the magic of spring ball is always, if one person is doing something well and they're going up against another person, does that mean that they're good or the other person is bad? If, let's just say, Ryan Watts and Legend Cavazos come out and they're playing on Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and they're looking pretty good, and you've got stuff locked down. Does that mean that Ohio State has found two really good cornerbacks, or does that mean that the young QBs are not necessarily able to deliver the ball on time and get it into the tight windows that a more experienced quarterback would be able to? I mean, if guys are running 15 yards free, like it's like, okay, well, that's still a problem in the defensive backfield. If guys are sort of close, but they're getting passes completed on them, is that a testament to how good Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson are? Because they are. Or is that a testament to the coverage isn't quite as close as you might think in the limited opportunities we get to watch practice? So there's always just kind of questions going both directions. And the nice thing about spring football is there's always something to complain about. Someone is always not doing their job. They as we always hear that when we're at practice, they'll, it's win or loser day. That means there's always a loser. So there's always someone to complain about, which, having been on the internet, everyone loves nothing more than something to complain about and to call a loser. So it's the best time of year, in my opinion.
Well, hey, if somebody's going to be terrible at their job, we got to let them know.
Mm-hmm. Otherwise, how else will they know?
How else would they know? Yes, sure. Football is a results-oriented industry, and they know by watching Chris Olave score touchdowns on them. But do they really know unless they get grief from it on the internet? I don't think so.
I mean, we see defensive backs, and this is a defensive back show. Who likes to let other people know that they failed at their jobs more than defensive backs? Like, the pass is incomplete. Sir, in case you did not realize that you do not have the football in your hand, I'm going to signal incomplete right in your face just to make sure that point is made. So I'm sure that if the defensive backs are, not having a good day of their own, they would appreciate being told that as well, because communication is the key to a successful and healthy relationship. So
you're right. Football is a feedback-related, oriented sport, and that is always welcome. I do think I'm just now imagining when Ohio State tweets out highlights and stuff, and it's Chris Olave scoring over Ryan Watts, and you're going to have people like, oh, Watts again. This dude sucks. It's like, well, Chris Olave is pretty good, and so when he can score against literally any cornerback in football, NFL or college, with any given moment. And the thing is, they're showing you highlights. So let's remember that they're giving you highlights, plays to get excited about. They're not going to show you, just a batted down pass necessarily, where then of course Ryan Watts would let Chris Olave know that the pass was incomplete in case he had missed it. So let's keep that in mind. What people will need to take into account or start to panic is when we get to watch and then we tell them what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because
absolutely,
as the voices, the authorities, to let people know that, yeah, man, Ryan Watts gave up 3 touchdowns, or Legend Cavazos did just, Garrett Wilson abused him in the slot, and Garrett Wilson's not even any good. So when Garrett Wilson is taking advantage of you, but yeah, there's some definitely you got to weigh all of this stuff. And if a couple of young corners struggle against 2 of the top receivers in college football, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's as long as you learn from it. And even Sevyn Banks, yes, he's going to give up touchdowns to Chris Olave. Let's just get used to that. Just understand that that's going to happen. But getting back to Sevyn Banks, Tom, I wrote this past week that over the last 25 years, Ohio State has had 28 starting corners. All but 6 of them were drafted, and they were all drafted within the top 4 rounds. After this year, do you see Sevyn Banks being the 7th or one of the many to be drafted in the top 4 rounds?
I think the track record is pretty clear there, and Kerry Combs has a very clear track record as well. When it's been his guys, if you're a starting cornerback, you're pretty much getting drafted. Because of the 6 guys who didn't get drafted, a lot of them were further back. It wasn't a lot of recent guys. It was guys who were more in the like 2013 ish.
Yeah, Travis Howard was the most recent, 2012.
Yeah, I mean that's a long time ago. And so basically, if you play for an Urban Meyer team outside of literally the first year, and you're a starting cornerback, you're going to get drafted because Urban Meyer recruits, and now Ryan Day continues to recruit the kind of fast, big, twitchy athletes who can run, who can jump, who can flip their hips, and all the stuff you need to do as a cornerback. They've got them all. You've got a guy who, in Kerry Combs, who was a NFL defensive backs coach, and knows how to coach guys up, and you have all the pieces there to be a good NFL cornerback. So I think the smart money, I think you would really have to have something pretty significant that to vote against that. Like, if the track record is this happens for literally everyone, then I think the smart money is on. It will probably continue to happen for people. Now, Cam Brown, will it happen for Cam Brown this year? Like, let's see how the recovery from the Achilles thing goes, because that's that can take a year to get back from that all entirely. But if he does recover from the Achilles, I would bet maybe not next year, but the year after that, Cam Brown probably joins that group as well.
Yeah, it's just this is how things are, and this is the next step after this. I expect Sevyn Banks to be totally fine. I don't really have any concerns about him. I don't know. Like, where would you put him in the realm of? Remember, Damon Arnett had his issues in 2018, and then bounced back and was fantastic in 2019. I think I would have Sevyn Banks maybe ahead of Damon Arnett in 2018. I don't know that he could get to Damon Arnett in 2019. Maybe he can. There's no reason to think he can't, other than he hasn't done it yet. Last year's a rough year to judge anybody, and that was his first year starting. He's 6'1", 200. He's the prototype in what you look for in corners at Ohio State and what the NFL looks for. So I'm not going to be shocked if he ends up being a first-round corner. And he has some ways to go, yeah, and I think this is the process of getting there. But I could see him being somewhere in that, somewhere in the Damon Arnett realm of, or even like Eli Apple in 2015, or where it's like very, very solid, and then you're surprised at how high they are selected in the draft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, he's probably not a first-round corner right now, because if he was a first-round corner right now, he would be training for the NFL draft and be a first-round corner in like a month. Like, that's not that's not what is happening here, because he's not quite there yet. There is a process. Like, I mean, as you mentioned, Damon Arnett went from the guy who every Ohio State fan hated to first-round draft pick in the span of a year, and had a pick 6 in that year, and was really good that year. Was very good, very clear with his communication with wide receivers generally in that year. I mean, as all great defensive backs are. But you just there is like a process here. Like, you don't expect the guys who are coming in their true freshman year to immediately come on the field and start. Like, that's just not a realistic expectation. Second year guys, you don't necessarily expect them to really be good. Like, it's like, if you're playing, that's a real good sign. You're not going to be a first-round draft pick after your second year, but if you're playing your second year, like, okay, that's a really good sign. It's after the third year, after the fourth year, where it's like, okay, now there's a lot of technique, there's a lot of refinement that goes into being a good cornerback, and really being prepped and coached up to be a first-round pick. It takes a while to get there. Sevyn Banks is someone who, like you said, has all the measurables, has everything you would need to. It's just continuing to refine that game, continuing to get better, and to get there. Because you can go through all these guys you want to go through: Garyon Conley, Marshawn Lattimore, Eli Apple. Like, go through the first couple of years of their career, and they do not look like first-round picks during the first couple of years of their career. So it's not really fair to expect that of Sevyn Banks. And he did not have a super fantastic year, but there's a million possible reasons for that. And the other piece of that is the safety spot was kind of a big problem last year in a whole bunch of different ways. And when you're not getting the safety help that you are probably expecting, or that you should be, like, that's a real good way to look bad as well. So it's not, when you see a guy chasing a wide receiver down the field, it does not automatically mean that guy is the guy who got beaten. It's only his fault. Like, sometimes it's more complicated than that.
You saying it wasn't Tough Borland's fault? Because it was Tough Borland's fault.
I think our position on that has been made relatively clear. The fact that Tough Borland was in that position is not Tough Borland's fault.
But still, he should have been able to get a hand on the Heisman winner. I mean, and clamp him down. You're a middle linebacker at Ohio State. Clamp him down.
He should have painted like a tunnel on the wall of a rock, and that was the only way. Yeah, Acme Dynamite was the only way that coverage was going to work.
Jump on a rocket. Come on.
Smart.
Slingshot. What are we talking about here? Giant slingshot. Come on. Like film study. That's what this takes.
Looney Tunes film study. Story of the Ohio State 2020 defense. Yes.
There you go. So Cameron Brown injures his Achilles like early November, late October. We're 5 months removed from that, so I wouldn't expect him anywhere. And that 9-month realm is right at the start of camp, so of fall camp. So, with that being said, now you've got Legend Cavazos, Ryan Watts, Tyreek Johnson, Denzel Burke is your other outside corners. Maybe Cameron Martinez, maybe Marcus Williamson. Those two, I'm not really sure about where they're going to fit in. So you've got those 4 guys. I think Denzel Burke you put on the outside looking in. Tyreek Johnson at this point, you have to assume he's been passed by. But I think there's an opportunity for him this spring because Ryan Watts, Legend Cavazos, very little experience. I think he got more experience if I were to look at the snap counts right now. He probably had more than those two. Certainly more than Legend Cavazos, who I don't believe played at all. But can he hold them off? And I think that's going to be a big thing for him this spring. And I don't know that he can. We haven't seen enough from him. We haven't heard enough about him. I remember last year we made a big deal because, hey, somebody said something good about Tyreek Johnson, and it was his 3rd year in the program, and we finally heard something. Hey, Tyreek Johnson's doing well, and so it's like it was a big deal because we had never heard it, and so you've got these 4. I do think we've mentioned this in the past. Denzel Burke has done a smart thing by enrolling early and participating and trying to get a leg up on the 2 guys coming in this summer. But he's also a guy who probably hasn't played as much corner as a lot of these guys because he's been more of a receiver. And so, again, I expect him to maybe do a little bit more watching than the other guys. And if I were to put, if we were to put some odds on these guys, on these 3 to be the second corner this spring, do you even see one of these guys emerging as the second corner this spring, or is it just going to be a rotation? I think it's just going to be a rotation, and they won't know.
Yeah, I don't know that I would think there's going to be a very consistent second guy, because I think the second guy, if healthy, is very clearly Cam Brown, but he's not going to be healthy this spring because, Tough Borland, I remember back when Tough Borland had an Achilles injury, and, Urban Meyer kept talking about how, well, he's a fast healer. So, and he suffered that in the spring, right? That was like March. Yeah. And then the fast healing got him back right before the season. So like maybe he played in the second game of that 2018 season, something like that. Maybe the third game. So that's 6 months. So, you're not going to rush Cam Brown back for the spring. So he's probably out. So yeah, if it's anyone to start, I guess it's Tyreek Johnson, and you kind of see, because he's someone who, he's been around long enough that I remember I wrote before spring ball last year, the 5 guys who this is the biggest spring of their careers. And I think one of them was Justin Hilliard, and that worked out pretty darn well. One of them was Jalen Harris, who didn't play. One of them was Elijah Gardner, who is, I think, gone. One of them was Tyreek Johnson. And, Tyreek Johnson didn't get a spring ball to, establish, because that was his 3rd year last year. So this is his 4th year. Like, if you are not clearly ahead of the younger guys, and this is your 4th year, like the writing is on the wall there, and it is in very big letters, and it is not hard to read. So, you have to if he is going to do it, this is when he has to do it. If he's not clearly ahead of these guys by the summer, like, okay, it's just not going to happen. And that's fine. You can still get a degree and you can still go on to do wonderful things in your life, but you're not going to be a starter at Ohio State if you're not clearly ahead of the younger guys at that point. Denzel Burke, I think, is someone who is a little bit like Cam Martinez to me last year, where I like every time we talked about the corners and the safeties, I kept forgetting about Cam Martinez because I had just in my head gone, you're not going to see anything from him this year because he really doesn't have enough experience to even think about challenging for a spot. Like, I'm interested to see him this spring because I was like, okay, now you've had a year. Let's see, maybe I'm not expecting big things from him. I just want to sort of see like where do things stand right now. And, I think you will see him because we watched the first practice of spring last year and we saw like Bryson Shaw in the slot, and it was like, oh, what does this mean? And then the world ended 2 practices later. And then it turned out it didn't mean anything, but they're going to try guys in a whole bunch of different spots. So, I guess my long answer to the question you asked 17 minutes ago is no, I don't think there's a clear number 2 corner on the team right now. And I think you're probably going to see a pretty big rotation of guys through there to see, figure out what they've got. Can it be Marcus Williamson? Can it be, Tyreek Johnson? Can it be Ryan Watts? Can it be Legend Cavazos? Can it be Cam Martinez? Can it, who will it be? And I think the answer is that we don't know. And I don't think any of them know either.
You're right. That was a long answer. From now on, for brevity's sake, just yeses and nos, please. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I think the potential of Ryan Watts is interesting because he's he looks 6'3", so which means he's maybe 6'2.5" or whatever. And that kind of corner is something that everybody would like to have. It's rare, so I wonder if it's even possible. And is he quick enough? Is he fast enough to handle that? Does he eventually move to safety or to the slot or whatever? And then Legend Cavazos, ridiculous athlete, but is he refined enough yet at this point? And I think all of this leads to I think one of the incoming freshmen could be very very possible for them to step into a role where they are the number 3 or the number 4 guy, and they are rotating in maybe by October or November. Because again, we don't know what Cameron Brown is going to look like. Next year will be better than this year as far as his Achilles, and as one of the fastest guys on the team, what is he now? As one of the quickest guys, what is he now? So I think there's some question there that just all of these corners, there are questions, and it's almost like the fewest questions are with the freshmen, the incoming freshmen, because we just haven't seen them and they're new and shiny, and which is an insane thing to say. They have had no coaching from Ohio State, and the other guys have. It's almost like I think it's completely wide open once fall camp hits as to who is going to be opposite Sevyn Banks, and then are they playing a slot corner, or what does the defense look like? But I think corner is wide open outside of Sevyn Banks, even with Cameron Brown, just because we don't yet know exactly how recovered he will be in August, September, October. Like he'll be better in January than he is in September. So maybe it's one of those things where he eventually takes over a starting role. It's a lot of names for one spot, and Kerry Combs likes his rotations, and I wonder if there's not much separation between 2 and 3. Is there like a 3-man rotation? Even if there's quite a bit of separation between 1 and 2, 1 and 3, does that really matter if there's not much separation between 2 and 3?
No.
Thank you.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right because I think there's a possibility that if Cam Brown's not 100% going into the fall, which he very well might not be, because we saw Tuff Borland in 2018 was like very clearly not right that whole season. Like even though he was back, he wasn't quite 100% back. He looked better in 2019 than he did in 2018 after suffering that injury. So you have to take that into account, that's this is not something he's going to be 100%. Even when he comes back, he's not going to be 100% probably at the start of fall. And so, he is, first of all, you have a much better chance for some of the younger guys to be, at least at his level. If he's not 100%, he should be ahead of them. And if everyone is 100%, he's ahead of them probably. If he's not 100%, those younger guys, be it Ryan Watts or Legend Cavazos or someone else, they have a chance to be at least sort of up to his level. And if they are, like, you might as well rotate them, because at least then you're keeping them fresh. And, then you have a chance to have Cam Brown get significantly better as the year goes on, just as that leg gets stronger. Because, an Achilles is, if you're going to be doing like short distance change of direction stuff and quick bursts and that kind of stuff, like that's actually pretty important as part of that whole process. So that's not the injury you want to suffer as a corner. So he's someone who is, if he does not look quite right in the first couple games of the season, if he's given up a touchdown or two against Oregon, do not necessarily write him off for the Michigan game later in the year. Like there's probably a lot of ground he's going to cover between then and the end of the year. If they get through those first couple of games, there's kind of like this long fallow period in their schedule where it's like, okay, now you have like a month to sort of get stuff sorted out, get stronger, get the younger guys a little bit, get more reps and all that kind of stuff, get guys up to speed. So they just need to get through like those first 2 weeks. And if they get through those first 2 weeks, and then you're pretty okay. And you got some time to get some stuff sorted out and get some of the younger guys up to speed, get Cam Brown a little healthier. But yeah, it's getting through those first 2 weeks is going to be a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, you're right. And the Tough Borland example is a good one, because we do remember 2018 where he had that just a hitch and couldn't quite run. 2019 got better. And then 2020, we saw step for step with Devontae Smith. And so it takes some time to just get back to 100%. The safeties, Tom, a lot of mystery here, not just because of the names, but because is it one high? Is it two high? What do they alternate who the one high is? Is it going to be a 4-2-5 where you've got a hybrid in there? And so there's a lot of questions. So I don't even know how we approach this other than maybe just individually. We know Josh Proctor, tons of experience, a senior now. He has not been the single high guy, or the sole single high guy. They've always looked for other guys instead of him or with him. So that tells me they don't think he can play it. So you move him closer to the line of scrimmage in whatever role, be it. We should probably just stop calling it the slot corner, maybe call it the strong safety at this point. I don't know. Now that Sean Wade is gone, and maybe he's a better strong safety, or maybe he's a better bullet. We'll figure that out. Lathan Ransom, can he be the deep guy, that free safety? Ryan Day, very high on him. He was the one freshman who emerged last year in a year where it was tough for freshmen to emerge, and not only the only true freshman, the only of you could throw in the redshirt freshman in there as well. It was Lathan Ransom instead of Ronnie Hickman and Bryson Shaw. And at the end of the season, it was, Lathan Ransom played against Clemson, didn't really play against Alabama. Marcus Hooker was nowhere except for special teams. Do we expect him to rise back up? And if he does, is that a good thing? Jansen Dunn coming in, who I think is to me, he's the second coming of Malik Hooker as just high school wise. We'll wait to see what he becomes. But if you're going to compare somebody to an Ohio State all-time great, that's the all-time great I would compare him to. That's all. I'm not saying that he's going to be that.
I like that someone is the second coming of Malik Hooker, and it's not literally Malik Hooker's brother. It's another guy. So yeah, it's interesting to me because it feels like if the answer at that deep safety spot isn't Lathan Ransom, like I'm making a bunch of faces at what's going to happen back there, because I feel like there are multiple options for a lot of different spots where it's like I think they have some good options here. I don't know if it's not Lathan Ransom. I don't know who I would put as who's second in line there. Maybe Ronnie Hickman, maybe. But I feel like we spent a lot of the 2020 season kind of ticking guys off the list. Like, can he play the deep safety spot? No. Can he play the deep safety spot? No. Can he play the deep safety spot? Probably not. There were a bunch of we have learned a lot about these players, and there's a lot about these players that is these are the things that they probably should not be asked to do anymore. And, again, give them another year, maybe, how much, I don't know if it was that there was necessarily a physical inability to do it. some of it was just like decision making was like, that was not the right choice. And, is that something you can overcome with reps, another year of reps, another year of film study, another year of, maybe the system gets changed. And if you only have literally one guy who you trust to be the one deep safety, like maybe you just can't play the one high this year. Like that may just be what that means, because you're putting a lot on that person. And then if that person goes down, like then you're really in trouble. If then, the system we want to run, we literally don't have anyone we trust to be maybe the most important player on the team. So I think, again, go back a year and listen to us talk about Jordan Fuller and how, like, I don't think people appreciate Jordan Fuller and how good he was and how much he meant to this team. And, I think if you look back now, I think people are getting a greater appreciation for exactly how much Jordan Fuller meant to this team. Because if they had a Jordan Fuller on last year's team, the Indiana game isn't nearly as close. They probably maybe give up one fewer touchdown to Penn State. And some of those games take a very different look, and it looks, I think, a lot more like the 2019 Ohio State defense, just with that one change. Like, you don't need to bring back Chase Young, you don't need to bring back Jeff Okudah. That one change probably makes a pretty substantial difference last year.
Yeah, I completely agree. I do think, though, maybe this year, maybe it's not as important to find the next Jordan Fuller, because I don't think they'd make the same mistakes again in terms of, we'll just keep trying to find one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, if you seems like you don't have one, so you got to do something else. And so that's why I kind of think, like, if he's not there, if it's not Lathan Ransom, they don't think he can do it, then they will do something else. And we saw Marcus Williamson doing it. I don't know that he's the answer. There's just so many questions. And I'm looking, Tom. Say it's a 4-2-5 and with a hybrid. Of all of these guys, give me the two safeties and Court Williams. Because, like, I'll give you the lineup that I think would be the one where I'd be like, okay, I want to see that. And it would be Lathan Ransom as the free safety. Let's say, I guess, some combination of Josh Proctor and Court Williams as the other two guys. You give me that, and I think I can work with that. Me being a person who stays at a Holiday Inn Express, like, to me that sounds intriguing. Any other, like, combination, and I'm like, I don't know.
If that combination worked out for them, that's probably the best case scenario, because you have guys who are probably in the positions that they're probably best suited for among anyone on the team. And, we're making these bold statements about Court Williams, and it's like, how much have you seen Court Williams? Like, well, in person, none. But I mean, he's one of those people who the buzz around the program with him is such that there are a whole lot of Court Williams believers in that program. And if Court Williams had been healthy last year, maybe that's another thing that potentially changes. And then Lathan Ransom isn't the only freshman who's, making a difference on the back end of that defense. So, and how is his recovery from his injury, and how is that going? And he should be, because that was fall camp, right? That was sometime over the summer or early fall camp. I think
it was a couple weeks. Yeah, it was a couple weeks into October. So
was it? Okay. So yeah,
fall camp.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was before the season, but fall camp lasted for like 4 months. So that's kind of a broad. Turns out much of 2020 was kind of a blur time-wise. How about that? Yeah, it was, you're close to, you're not going to see him really this spring. So, okay, what does he look like next fall? Because, I think we had similar hopes for Ronnie Hickman last year, because Ronnie Hickman missed all of his first year on campus with a recovering from a lower body injury. And then just wasn't, he just didn't quite get up to speed last year. So, how long will it take Court Williams to get up to speed? And those are two guys who you hear positive buzz about. So, if, there's a lot of ifs here. There's a lot of ifs in all of these conversations, but, there's ifs around Court Williams' return to health, around Cameron Brown's return to health, around, okay, now Ronnie Hickman has a full year of health, all of that stuff. Like, there's a lot of question marks that we're probably going to start to maybe get some answers about as we go through spring ball, but we're not anywhere close to having those answers yet. And we may walk out of the spring game going, well, we have more information than we did a month ago. How much more do we actually know about what's going to happen this fall? Like some, but not nearly all.
Yeah. Because we haven't seen some of these guys fail or struggle, like you fall into the message board trap of, because we haven't seen this guy struggle, he's better than the guy who has struggled. And so you're talking about Court Williams. Yeah. And Lathan Ransom has only played so many snaps. Yeah. Like we've seen Marcus Hooker make too many mistakes. We've seen Marcus Williams make too many mistakes. And then I go to the corners and then what I said like 20 minutes ago. I think, hey, maybe the cleanest guys are the two kids coming in, the two freshmen, because they haven't had any downturns yet. And that's just it's a bad overall statement of the secondary that there's been so many questions and so many issues. But again, Tom, there was a pandemic.
When?
It was it's still going on.
Oh, that fact.
Yes, it has impacted the Ohio State secondary, the defense as a whole, the offense as a whole, everybody, in fact, in terms of development. And so while you're saying like Tyreek Johnson at this point, what is he? But you know what? Maybe this is his time, and maybe this is where Marcus Hooker, going into his fourth year, finally puts it all together. Same with Marcus Williamson. This is his fifth year. He came back for a reason. He could have, he used that extra year. But it's just all like everybody question mark. And Matt Barnes, new secondary coach. Here you go, bud. Like,
have fun storming the castle.
and so there's a number of guys to work with, but it's kind of like the basketball team where, yeah, there's talent, but there's also flaws all around. Mm-hmm. And so you've just got to smooth out the flaws and accentuate the positives. And I mean, this is Ohio State, so there should be 5 guys that you can find to start in your secondary and succeed. And there should be another 3 guys behind those who can come in whenever you need and not be a huge drop off. And so this is their first spring in 2 years. So you would expect some considerable development between now and then all summer long and then the fall. So I think they'll be okay. There are so many questions with both spots, honestly, and nickel as well, that for me, this is the biggest concern on the team, and that's with having quarterbacks who have never thrown a pass.
It almost has to be the biggest concern on the team because with the track record that you've seen at quarterback is it'll be fine. Like Ryan Day knows what he's doing. Like until there's a year that it's like, oh no, the quarterbacks don't know which way to throw the ball. That like you just kind of assume that there's enough raw talent there, there's enough coaching ability there, there's enough track record there that it's just like, it'll be fine. Like you have not had a year with the Ohio State quarterbacks that looked like last year with the Ohio State defensive backs since 2012. I mean, like early Braxton Miller, the quarterback play was not super fantastic. Like he won the silver football, but that was like mostly with his legs, not with his arm. So yeah, it has been a minute since there has been bad like Ohio State quarterback play that was as concerning as the defensive backs, and there are not necessarily immediate answers because they're normally you just sort of go, okay, there is a progression. Like we've said, like first year, like you don't do a lot. Second year, you're starting to contribute. Third year, you're pretty good. Fourth year, you're in the NFL. Like it's just that's sort of the progression. All the stuff last year kind of threw all of that off. And the other piece of this is something that I feel like we talk about a decent amount, but it's worth remembering is why they're in this position. And they've had some weird stuff go on with recruiting at cornerback where, why does it seem like they're a couple bodies short? Like, well, there was the year that Jordan Battle flipped to Alabama on early signing day, and he was starting for a national championship Alabama last year. Do you think he would have helped in the back end of the Ohio State defense? Yeah, probably. Clark Phillips, true freshman last year, starting for he started for Utah as a true freshman and he flipped from Ohio State to Utah on early signing day. After Jeff Hafley left. I mean, there are pieces like that and guys who just like, and then you have an injury to Cam Brown and stuff just spirals. And, you had a little fallow period under Taver Johnson in recruiting at cornerback. And these things, it's like a couple of years ago when Ohio State was in like really bad shape with offensive line recruiting and they were down. It was when they brought Enoch Vamahi, the year that they brought Enoch Vamahi in very, very late. And then they brought Jonah Jackson in as a grad transfer, and that sort of like patched over the recruiting. And now the offensive line's in a really good place again. Like you can have like one or two bad cycles, and then it takes a little while to dig out of that. That's not an immediate solution. And it doesn't sound like there's help coming in the transfer portal, at least right now. So they're just going to have to kind of figure it out with the pieces they've got. And they have talented players. It's just a matter of figuring out how do you deploy them to take the best advantage of everyone's skills and put people in a position to succeed, because that is not necessarily like a real clean, easy answer this year. And that's what makes this, probably the position of biggest concern, but also maybe the single most interesting position on the field this spring.
Yeah, and we'll see who, after spring transfers happen. Jonah Jackson transferred before spring, if I recall, and took part in spring practice for Ohio State, maybe, or did he announce it and then transfer after spring because he had to graduate? Maybe that's what it was.
He transferred because he showed up in July or whatever, yeah. And then it had his black stripe off like 2 days later. It was like he had not unpacked his suitcase yet, and he already had lost his black stripe, and it was like, all right, that's probably a good sign. And then he was all Big Ten and got drafted, and he's playing for the Detroit Lions now. So
yes, very, very good. Always fun to talk to. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not expecting anything out of the transfer portal. I think they have to work with what they have. Tom, do you know the last Ohio State freshman cornerback to earn a starting job as a true freshman?
In the start of the season or at any point
eventually,
in the season? Yes. Jeff Okudah? Was Jeff Okudah the guy?
Well, that doesn't count. That was one game.
I mean, did he earn a starting spot?
Well, no. Denzel Ward left. He opted out, right?
He did. Yes, Denzel Ward opted out in the Cotton Bowl against USC.
All right, during the middle of the season.
Okay. Other than the actual answer, do I know the answer? No, I don't know. Is it like Sean Springs or something crazy like that? I don't know.
No, Malcolm Jenkins.
Okay. All right.
So 2005 was like almost immediately the nickelback, and then eventually started outside at cornerback, pushing Tyler Everett back inside. Tyler Everett probably never should have been starting at corner at Ohio State. It was more of a safety, but it wasn't that long removed from Ohio State starting a linebacker at cornerback. Mm-hmm. So, and then the year after that, a wide receiver.
Things can always be worse.
Yes. And so Ohio State here stuck with corners at cornerback.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how it goes. Tom, do you have anything else on the secondary before we call it a day?
I don't think so. I mean, I'll plug tomorrow's morning scoop. Have Brett Ciancia from Pick Six Previews on. He is always a fantastic guest, someone I've had on a few times. Always enjoy talking to him because he is just encyclopedic in his knowledge, and it's just sort of like talking to him before we start recording. You just mentioned a program, and he's talking about rattling off names. I'm like, it's early March. How do you know all this stuff about these? Like, so yeah, he is a fantastic guest. I had planned a whole show where I was talking to him about, which college football teams are blue bloods, because he does a poll every year with like 100,000 votes from across the country. So he has this like really good sense of tracking over the years, like which programs are perceived as blue bloods. There are two of the three outside of Ohio State. There's Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska. Three of those four are considered blue bloods nationally in his poll, have been the whole time. And I'm going to give you a hint. Nebraska is one that is, which is the one that I think people would immediately go, no, then not anymore. So yeah, they're one of the Big Ten East Big Three is not considered a blue blood. I thought that was really interesting. Talk to him a little bit about why that is, some of the perceptions around those programs nationally. But before we started recording, we sort of shifted the whole show around what we were talking about, because before the show we were just sort of shooting the breeze before we hit record, and he said, I think Ohio State is like legitimately the most interesting spring game anywhere in the country this spring. And he will watch like literally every spring game there is in the country. And he said Ohio State is the one he's most interested to see. And I said, it's funny because we keep talking about this, about all these different positions on Buckeye Weekly. And I keep saying, like, I'm really interested to see what happens there. And he's like, you're not crazy. Like there's so much talent, but so many questions. It's like there are both questions and probably answers there in all of these spots around the field. but you don't know, you don't know what those answers are yet. So yeah, it is not just you and I and the dear listeners at home who are super interested to see what's going on with Ohio State this spring, because Brett is not an Ohio State guy. He's in Philly, I believe, and not an Ohio State guy by any means, but yeah, he thought that Ohio State spring practice from the quarterbacks on down is the one he is the most interested to see all spring.
It is interesting that one of Penn State and Michigan not being in blue blood, of course their colors are blue and whatever else, and they're very proud of themselves and with their colors. And it would be a shame that one of them is now going to be disappointed that they're just regular old red blood.
Regular old blood, blue blood on the field. Yes, it's yeah, I was scrolling through there, and we didn't even get a chance to talk about this. This was one of those questions that I had, and then we ended up going 20 something minutes on all the other stuff because he's just fun to talk to and has a lot of interesting stuff to say. The school that prompted him to start this whole project like 4 years ago there was a national college football writer who called Washington a blue blood, and he kind of went, is Washington a blue blood in college football? And this year, of the 20 something schools he polled, the school that had the least yes votes was Washington, 6% yes. So turns out Washington not actually a blue blood. So
well, if you poll the people in 1991.
Mm-hmm. See, the interesting thing is, he said it like doesn't change over the years all that much, because there's a certain amount of like you can't be like real nouveau riche. Like Clemson wasn't particularly close to a yes, because you have that time between Danny Ford and Dabo Swinney where it was just nothing, and even before Danny Ford, like there was a bunch of not that much. So you have to kind of be really good over the years, and decade after decade after decade of being at least like 9-10 win good, if not better, top 10 kind of team, decade after decade after decade. I will spoil the surprise. Ohio State is actually one of the blue bloods of college football. There are three that are kind of like the clear 90+% yes votes, and it's Ohio State, Alabama, Oklahoma, which, that makes sense. Like those are three teams that, they've had kind of down periods, but for the most part, like decade after decade after decade, they have been like very, very, very good. That's kind of what it takes. So it takes a while to get into that group. It takes a while to fall out of that group. So,
well, that's what I'm thinking. Like UCLA,
I don't think they were even part of the poll. Like, what would the argument for UCLA be? Like Lou Alcindor, like he didn't play football. Like,
no, that's what I'm glad, because it's like, well, if UCLA is part of this poll, like, I mean,
no,
eventually you got to start shipping people out.
Yeah, no, and there were Tennessee, he said, is the only one that's like really plunged down, because it's just like they haven't been very good for quite a while, and they weren't super consistent even before that. But yeah, Clemson is not there yet because they're kind of nouveau riche, and there are some programs that are, like Nebraska, like they're still blue bloods, but they're the English family with the huge manor house where the roof is leaking and they can't really afford the mortgage anymore, and it's like, well, I mean, yes, there is still a Rolls Royce in the garage, but it doesn't actually run. And so, at some point you fall out of that category. That hasn't happened to them yet. But it's a really interesting conversation, just sort of, and it's it's the very best kind of thing, the kind of thing that will make people argue on the internet. So that's these topics are few and far between. So I thought it was a really fun, interesting show. And I mean, he said a bunch of stuff that I think Ohio State fans will kind of find themselves smiling and nodding and enjoying. So I think that'll be one you guys will enjoy.
Who would win in a fight, USC or Superman?
Like after USC gets clobbered, does Clay Helton still have his job? Better question. Yes,
of course he does. All right, then I think that'll do it, Tom. You've plugged your podcast, which is always great, because I wasn't even going to ask about it because I know you've already recorded it, and so it's no fun when I ask and you've already taken care of it. So it's only fun when you're like, well, I don't know yet. But sometimes it's not fun because then it ends up being me.
Yeah,
because everything else falls through.
Then you remind me on a Thursday afternoon, like, oh yeah, I got to do one more of these, don't I? What are you doing for the next 30 minutes?
So that'll do it for this week, Tom. You're done. I'm done. There is still a Friday to deal with, not recording wise, but just calendar wise. And then we got some basketball this weekend, and then the Big Ten tournament next weekend, where it looks like Buckeyes we'll see, probably start on Thursday. I'm still waiting from the Big Ten. Like I don't think anybody has heard from the Big Ten on credentials yet. It's like, all right, okay, that's fine, whatever.
Please take your time. There's no rush. We don't need to book hotels or anything. It's fine. And there's gonna be 8,000 fans there now. So now you gotta fight people for hotel rooms all of a sudden. It's not gonna be the clean, easy, like, yeah, you wanna get the hotel that's literally right across the street from the stadium. That will be $13. Like, yeah, nope, not anymore. We are done staying in State College for Penn State football games. We are done those the glory days of 2020 are long gone.
It's true. The glory days of traveling during a pandemic are almost over. So, all right, that'll do it. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. Make sure to check out BuckeyeScoop.com. Also, check out the rest of the podcasts. Gives in the Bank. Mark told me today that him and Bill are going to be recording. They got to get their 2022 rankings all set, and then they're going to be dropping a podcast this week. Sloopcast on Mondays. Silver Bullets, I think, is dropping one yesterday, maybe. And old Kirk, the SWO Scoop World Order with Ted Ginn yesterday was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And it may only be available on YouTube right now and on our website. We'll get it to the rest of the platforms, but just Ted Ginn, I loved it because you don't get to hear much from Ted Ginn. Mm-hmm. We saw him once. I saw him in spring football, the high school coaches thing, like 2 years ago, and I wanted to grab him, but he was off. Like he's pretty fast.
He's faster than you. Ted Ginn is faster than you. Is that what we learned?
That day. That day, yeah. But it just so many great stories of just all of the guys around Glenville. The Pierre Woods stories where Pierre Woods is still at Glenville and Ted Ginn is just like this little pest. It was like the cartoons where you get the big bulldog and a little pest dog, and it's like that was Ted Ginn to Pierre Woods, and he just let him hang around, and Lil Ted, as everybody called him back then, and some really, really fantastic stories, and then stories of being at Ohio State, of course, and the Alamo Bowl game where Ted Ginn had to play some quarterback, and
the comment about Justin Zwick getting hurt in the Alamo Bowl.
Yeah, so I highly recommend it. It's like 45 minutes, and I just sat and watched it the entire time, and it was really good just to see that. And I know Kirk's got more comments, so there's we're, like I said, we're always trying to improve. Was that this show where we were talking about that, Tom? It's been so long.
Yes, an hour and 45 minutes ago at the start of the show. Yes, and you can find those. He mentioned YouTube. Just go to youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop and just hit the subscribe button right there, and Please. Then you'll get a notification then. And every time we post a new show, post a new morning scoop show, like all of our podcasts will go up there. You'll also get interviews with recruits, all that kind of stuff. He didn't mention Around the Oval, which is Alex Gleitman's podcast. He does a lot of interviews with recruits. He does. He just had Keon Grace, who's the most recent commitment on his show this week. But we also have camp footage, highlights, interviews with players at camps. I mean, just a million different things. And anytime we do a press conference with Chris Holtman, Ryan Day, players, that's all up there. So if you hit the subscribe button, you'll get notified, and you can say, hey, that sounds like something I'm interested in watching. And then you can just watch it. And we are aiming to make your life as easy as possible. We literally just need you to hit one button. Just hit subscribe on YouTube. That's it. And then your life will be better.
Yeah, but I have to type in YouTube, don't I?
YouTube.com/
.com. That's 4 extra. I got to type all of this in? Where do I got to type it? On my computer?
Yes, this is some Oliver Twist stuff that we were putting on you. Like, yeah, you got to... down to the salt mines. You have to type 17 letters into your computer.
Let me guess. I got to use my electricity for this.
Not if you steal someone else's. Just go to your neighbors have an outdoor plug. Like, just plug your stuff into your neighbors' outlets outside their house.
I already got my television there. That's where I plug. So you want me to unplug my television? Is that what you're saying?
We'll get you a power strip. We'll figure it out off the air.
Yes. Let's table this. All right. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week.